I did not knock on the heavy oak door of the manor that afternoon. I did not announce my arrival to the people who believed they owned the world. I simply walked in, guided by a mother's instinct that screamed louder than any siren, and what I heard from the hallway froze the blood in my veins. It was the sound of shattering porcelain, followed by a voice dripping with venom, a voice that said, "You clumsy, worthless creature, you are lucky we even let you breathe our air." My name is Elena Russo. I am 58 years old, and for the last decade I have defined myself by my strength. I built a logistics empire in Chicago from nothing but grit and sleepless nights. I spent 10 years sending checks, 10 years missing birthdays, 10 years convincing myself that my sacrifice was purchasing a fairy tale life for my daughter, Sophia. I believed she was the queen of high society in Savannah, Georgia. I believed she was living in luxury with her charming husband, Julian Thorne, and his aristocratic mother, Beatrice. I was wrong. I was so devastatingly wrong that the guilt still burns my throat like acid. I had decided to visit as a surprise. It was Sophia's 28th birthday, and I wanted to see the life I had funded. I carried a suitcase filled with Italian silk, rare vintage books she loved, and a heavy heart full of hope. I imagined her greeting me at the door of that historic southern estate, her face glowing with health, her hands manicured, her laughter ringing through the halls. Instead, I found the door ajar. The humidity of the Georgia afternoon clung to my skin as I stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of old money beeswax, stale lilies, and something rotting beneath the floorboards. I followed the sound of the cruel voice into the dining room. There, on her knees, was my Sophia. She was scrubbing wine stains from a Persian rug with a coarse brush. Her hands, the hands of a pianist, the hands I had protected her entire life, were raw, red, and cracked. She was wearing a faded gray dress that hung loosely on her skeletal frame. Standing over her was Beatrice Thorne, a woman who wore pearls like armor and held a glass of iced tea as if it were a scepter. Beatrice kicked the bucket of soapy water near Sophia's leg. "You missed a spot," she sneered. "If you cannot even clean a rug properly, how do you expect to be a wife? Julian deserves better than a maid who cannot scrub." My daughter kept her head down. "Yes, Mother Beatrice," she whispered. Her voice was so small, so broken, it sounded like dry leaves crushing underfoot. I felt the air leave my lungs. This was not a marriage. This was an execution of the soul, carried out slowly over 3 years. I dropped my suitcase. The thud echoed like a gunshot in the silent house. Sophia looked up. Her eyes were hollow, rimmed with dark circles that spoke of endless nights without sleep. When she saw me, panic flooded her face. Not joy, panic. "Mom," she gasped, scrambling to stand but stumbling on her weak legs. Beatrice turned slowly, her expression shifting from cruelty to a mask of polite disdain. "Well," she said, smoothing her skirt, "the ATM has finally arrived in person." In that moment, the Elena Russo who signed million-dollar contracts disappeared. The mother in me woke up, a dormant beast realizing its cub was bleeding. I did not scream. I did not cry. I stared at Beatrice with the cold calculation of a woman who knows exactly how to dismantle an enemy. "I am not here to visit," I said, my voice steady. "I am here to audit. But I cannot tell you the end just yet. To understand the fury that consumed me, you must understand the love that fueled it. I need to take you back to Chicago, to a small apartment smelling of garlic and oregano, where Sophia and I were a team of 2 against the world. My husband died before Sophia turned 4. He left us with debts and a rusted truck. I drove that truck until the wheels nearly fell off, delivering produce, moving furniture, doing whatever it took. Sophia was my light. She was brilliant, artistic, and sensitive. She would sit at the kitchen table sketching skyscrapers while I balanced our checkbook. "Mom," she would say, pushing a drawing toward me, "one day I will design a building named after you, the Elena Tower." I would kiss her forehead, smelling the strawberry shampoo I bought on sale. "You just build your dreams, baby. I will handle the foundation." And I did. I worked 18-hour days. I expanded from one truck to a fleet. By the time Sophia was accepted into the prestigious architecture program at Cornell, I could pay her tuition in full. When she graduated top of her class, I cried harder than I ever had. She was my masterpiece. Then she met Julian Thorne. He was a client, a developer from the South looking for investors. He was charming, with a drawl that sounded like molasses and eyes that promised eternity. He courted her with an intensity that overwhelmed her. Flowers every day, private jets, handwritten poetry. Sophia, who had spent her life watching her mother work, was swept away by the romance of a man who seemingly wanted to take care of her. I was suspicious. I saw the way he looked at the check when we went to dinner, never reaching for his wallet. I saw the way he cut her off in conversation. But Sophia was in love. "He treats me like a princess, Mom," she told me, her eyes sparkling. "His family owns the Thorne estate in Savannah. They have history, they have stability." I wanted her to be happy. I wanted her to have the ease I never did. So when they married in a lavish ceremony that I largely paid for, I let her go. I stayed in Chicago, working to send them a monthly allowance that Julian insisted was necessary for Sophia's investments in the family business. $5,000 a month, then 7, then 10. For 3 years, I sent the money. For 3 years, Sophia's calls became shorter. She stopped talking about her architecture designs. She stopped sending sketches. When I asked how she was, the answer was always the same rehearsed line. "Everything is perfect, Mom. Julian is wonderful." Now, standing in that dining room, looking at my daughter's ruined hands, I knew every word had been a lie. Beatrice stepped forward, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "You are trespassing, Miss Russo. This is a private residence." I looked at Sophia. "Go pack your bags, Sophia." Beatrice laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "She is not going anywhere. She is my son's wife. She has duties. The gala is tonight, and the silver needs polishing." Sophia looked at me, trembling. "Mom, please. You should go. Julian will be home soon. He doesn't like surprises." The fear in her voice broke my heart into 1,000 shards. It was the fear of a battered animal. "I am not leaving until we talk," I said. Beatrice checked her watch. "Fine. You can wait in the library. But do not expect tea. We are busy people." I walked into the library, but I did not sit. I began to look. I looked at the dust collecting on the leather-bound books. I looked at the frayed edges of the curtains. I saw the outline of paintings that had been removed from the walls, likely sold. The house was a corpse, dressed up in finery to hide the decay. I took out my phone and called the one man in Chicago I trusted with my life, Marcus, my forensic accountant and private investigator. "Marcus," I said, "I need a full financial autopsy on the Thorne family in Savannah, Julian and Beatrice. I want to know every debt, every loan, every secret, and I need it yesterday." "I hear it in your voice, Elena," Marcus said. "What did they do?" "They broke her, Marcus. They broke my girl." "I will find everything," he promised. I checked into a hotel downtown. I tried to get Sophia to come with me for dinner, but she refused. She said she had to cook for Julian. She said he had a specific diet. She sounded like a programmed robot. For the next 3 days, I watched from a distance. I parked my rental car down the street from the estate. I saw Sophia in the garden, hauling heavy bags of mulch in the blistering heat, while Beatrice sat on the porch under a fan. I saw Julian come home in a leased luxury car, tossing his keys at Sophia as if she were a valet. I saw him grab her arm aggressively when she didn't open the door fast enough. I documented everything: photos, videos, timestamps. On the 4th day, Marcus called me. I was sitting in the hotel room, staring at a photo of Sophia from college, vibrant and smiling. "Elena," Marcus said, his voice grave, "you need to sit down." "I am sitting. Tell me." "The Thorne family is destitute. Technically, they have been bankrupt for 5 years. The estate is leveraged to the hilt. They have 3 mortgages." "3?" "Yes. And that is not the worst part. Julian has a gambling problem. A massive one. He owes money to some very dangerous people in Atlanta." I felt a cold rage settling in my stomach. "And the money I sent?" gone, funneled directly into covering the interest on the loans and Julian's debts. Sophia hasn't seen a dime of it. In fact, I found transfers from an account in Sophia's name. It seems she liquidated her own savings, the trust fund you set up for her, everything. She gave them everything, I whispered. Elena, there is more. Julian has an apartment in downtown Savannah. He pays the rent for a woman named Clara. She is 19. I closed my eyes. My daughter was a slave in a house of lies, funding her husband's mistress while being treated like dirt. Who holds the debt? I asked. What? The mortgages. The promissory notes. Who holds them? A distressed asset firm in New York. They are looking to unload the portfolio. It is considered toxic debt. Buy it, I said. Elena, that is over $4 million. That is your retirement. That is your liquidity for the business expansion. I did not hesitate. Buy it, Marcus. I want every single cent of debt the Thorne family owes to belong to me. I want to own the roof over their heads, the ground under their feet, and the very air they breathe. Are you sure? Do it. Wire the funds today. I spent the next week finalizing the paperwork. I met with lawyers in Savannah. I secured the deeds. I became the legal owner of the Thorne estate and the primary creditor for Julian Thorne's personal liabilities. During that week, I managed to get Sophia to meet me for coffee for 10 minutes. She looked terrified. She kept checking her phone. Mom, you have to stop staring at the house, she said, her hands shaking around the cup. Julian is getting angry. He says you are embarrassing us. Embarrassing you? I reached out and took her hands. Her knuckles were swollen. Sophia, look at me. Why are you doing this? You are an architect. You are brilliant. I am a wife, she recited, her eyes glazing over. A wife supports her husband. Julian is under a lot of pressure. The family legacy is on his shoulders. He is crushing you, Sophia. He loves me. He has a temper. It is my fault. I provoke him. I am clumsy. I forget things. My stomach turned. It was the classic anthem of the abused, taking the blame for the abuser's violence. I have a surprise for you, I said softly. Please, no more gifts, Mom. Beatrice gets mad when I get things she doesn't. This is not a gift for Beatrice. Come to the house tomorrow at 10 in the morning. I can't. I have to clean the chandeliers. You will come, or I will come there with the police. Sophia's eyes widened. Okay, I will try. The next morning, the sky was gray and heavy with impending rain. I dressed in a sharp black suit, the kind I wore when I was closing a deal that would crush a competitor. I carried a leather portfolio containing the deeds and the photos Marcus had sent me. I drove to the estate. I did not park down the street. I drove right up to the front entrance, blocking Julian's car. I walked in. The door was unlocked. Sophia was in the hallway, polishing a massive mirror. When she saw me, she dropped the cloth. Mom, you have to leave. Julian is still asleep. Not for long, I said. I walked past her into the dining room. Beatrice was eating a grapefruit, reading a society paper. She looked up, her lip curling. You again? I thought I told you. Get your son, I interrupted. Excuse me? Get your son, now, or I will go upstairs and drag him out of bed myself. Something in my voice, a deadly calm, made Beatrice pause. She stood up, her face flushing red. You are a vulgar woman. I will have you arrested for trespassing. Call the police, I challenged. Please. I would love for them to be here for this. Julian appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a silk robe, looking disheveled and annoyed. What is all this noise? I have a headache. He saw me and sighed. Oh, the mother. Look, Elena, I appreciate the money you send, really, but you cannot just barge in here. We have standards. Come down here, Julian, I said. We need to discuss your rent. He laughed, descending the stairs. My rent? This is my house. My family has owned this land for 200 years. Not anymore, I said. I threw the file onto the dining table. It slid across the mahogany surface and stopped in front of Beatrice. What is this? She asked. Open it. She opened the file. Her eyes scanned the documents. Her face went pale, then gray. Her hand flew to her mouth. This is impossible. What is it, Mother? Julian asked, walking over. He looked at the papers. He frowned. Transfer of deed? Assignment of mortgage? What is this nonsense? It means, I said, stepping forward, that the bank sold your bad debt. They sold it to a holding company, and that holding company belongs to me. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to stop. I own this house, Julian. I own the 3 mortgages you haven't paid in 2 years. I own the loans you took out to pay your gambling debts in Atlanta. I own you. Julian laughed nervously. This is a joke. You are a truck driver's widow. You don't have this kind of money. I built a dynasty while you were busy spending yours, I said. And unlike you, I pay my bills. Sophia was standing by the door, trembling. Mom, what are you doing? I am evicting them, Sophia. Julian's face twisted into a snarl. You can't do that. I have rights. You have 24 hours, I said calmly. And that is me being generous. Legally. Since you are in default and I have an immediate possession clause due to the condition of the property, I could throw you out now. But we are family, Beatrice shrieked. You would do this to your daughter's family? My daughter has no family here, I spat. I looked at Sophia. Come here, Sophia. She didn't move. She looked from me to Julian. Julian's eyes narrowed. He walked over to Sophia and put a hand on her shoulder. His grip was tight. I saw her wince. Sophia, tell your mother she is being ridiculous. Tell her to sign the house back over to us. We are having a baby, for God's sake. The world stopped. I looked at Sophia's stomach. She looked down. You are pregnant? I whispered. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. 3 months. Julian smiled, a shark smile. See? You wouldn't throw your own grandchild out on the street, would you, Elena? He thought he had won. He thought the baby was his shield. He did not know that a mother's protection is fierce, but a grandmother's wrath is apocalyptic. I walked over to them. I looked Julian in the eye. You think a baby saves you? I asked. A baby is exactly why you are leaving. I will not let a child grow up watching its mother be treated like a slave. I will not let a child be raised by a gambler and a narcissist. I pulled out the second envelope. The photos. I tossed them at Sophia's feet. Look at them, Sophia. She hesitated, then bent down. She picked up the photos of Julian and the girl, Clara, photos of them at dinner, photos of him kissing her, photos of the apartment lease in his name. Julian's face drained of color. Where did you get those? Sophia stared at the images. Her hands shook so hard the photos rattled. He told me he was at business meetings, she whispered. He told me he was working late to save the estate. He was spending my money on her, I said, while you scrubbed his floors. Sophia looked up at Julian. Her eyes were wide, filled with a pain so deep it looked like physical agony. Is this true? She asked. Julian sneered. Oh, grow up, Sophia. You are boring. You are always tired. A man has needs. If you were a better wife, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere. Beatrice chimed in. Men wander, Sophia. It is your job to look the other way and keep the house in order. Don't be dramatic. That was the moment. That was the spark. I watched my daughter's face change. The sadness evaporated, replaced by something cold and hard. She looked at the man she had worshipped. She looked at the woman she had served. And she saw them, truly saw them, for the monsters they were. Sophia stood up straight. She wiped her tears. She walked over to Julian and slapped him. It was a solid, resounding slap that echoed through the room. Get out, she said. Julian touched his cheek, stunned. What did you say? My mother owns the house, Sophia said, her voice gaining strength. And I am her daughter. So if she says, get out, you get out? But the baby, my baby, she corrected. You are just the donor, and a poor one at that. Beatrice began to wail. This is illegal! We will sue! With what money? I asked. You don't have any. I turned to Julian. You have until sunset. If you are still here, I have the sheriff on speed dial. And Julian? If you ever come near my daughter or my grandchild again, I will make sure the IRS takes a very close look at those offshore accounts you tried to hide. Julian looked at me with pure hatred, but he saw the resolve in my eyes. He knew he was beaten. He stormed out of the room, knocking over a vase on his way. Beatrice followed him, sobbing about her pearls and her reputation. When they were gone, the silence in the house was different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was empty, waiting to be filled. Sophia looked at me. She looked at her hands. She looked at the grand staircase she had polished just that morning. "I don't have anywhere to go," she whispered. "You have everywhere to go," I said, pulling her into my arms. "You are coming home." We left the manor that afternoon. We took only Sophia's clothes and her old sketchbooks that she had hidden under the bed. We left the silver. We left the rugs. We left the lies. The recovery was not easy. You cannot undo 3 years of abuse in a day. Sophia cried for weeks. She had nightmares. She apologized constantly for existing. I took her back to Chicago. I set her up in a beautiful apartment overlooking the lake. I found her the best therapist money could buy. I hired a private chef to make sure she ate healthy food for the baby. Slowly, the color returned to her cheeks. She started drawing again. At first, it was dark sketches, jagged lines and shadows. But as her belly grew, the lines softened. She started designing nurseries, then houses, then skyscrapers. 7 months later, my grandson, Leo, was born. He had Sophia's eyes and my chin. When I held him for the first time, I promised him that he would never know the feeling of being small. As for the thorns, justice is a slow grinder, but it grinds exceedingly fine. Beatrice moved into a small assisted living facility paid for by the state. Without her mansion and her servants, she withered. The society friends she bragged about abandoned her the moment the money ran out. She died 2 years later, alone. Julian tried to sue me. He failed. He tried to find another wealthy woman to marry, but his reputation was ruined. The gambling debts caught up with him. The last I heard, he was working as a bartender in a dive bar in Atlanta, looking old and tired, telling anyone who would listen about how he used to be a king. I sold the Thorne estate. I didn't want it. I used the profit to set up a foundation for women escaping financial abuse. I named it the Sophia Initiative. 5 years have passed since that day in Savannah. I am sitting in a coffee shop in Chicago. Across the table, Sophia is showing me blueprints for a new library she is designing for the city. She is wearing a sharp blue blazer. Her hands are manicured, holding a pen with confidence. She laughs at something I say, a full, throaty laugh that makes people turn and smile. Next to her, little Leo is drawing on a napkin. "Grandma, look, a rocket ship." "It's beautiful, Leo," I say. Sophia puts her hand on mine. "Mom?" "Yes, honey?" "Thank you. Not just for saving me, but for teaching me that I was worth saving." I squeeze her hand. "You were always the investment, Sophia. The money was just paper. You were the wealth." I look at them, my daughter and my grandson, and I realize that the most expensive thing I ever bought wasn't the mortgage or the company. It was their freedom, and it was a bargain at any price. Sometimes we trust the wrong people. We give our hearts to those who only want to consume them. But listen to me carefully. Rock bottom is not the end. It is the solid foundation upon which you build your new life. If you are on your knees right now, scrubbing the floor of someone else's expectations, stand up, walk out the door. Your story does not end in the dark. It ends when you decide to turn on the light.